Christ is risen. Friends, we come not to celebrate some historical moment, some historical event in time only, but to live into the reality that Jesus Christ is alive right now, and still full of surprises. In John 20, Mary Magdalene goes to the tomb in grief, weeping, so distraught, and the stone is rolled away, and she thinks his body's stolen. She runs to tell the disciples, and they check it out and they leave, but Mary's still crying. Then this big moment happens. She turns and sees Jesus. I don't know if you've ever been in that kind of situation when somebody you don't expect to see is right there. They could be your best friend. You're like, who are you? Right? Happens to me all the time. I remember one time I took my kids to Disney. They were fairly little. And anytime I go out anywhere, my father, who was a clergy, told me the same thing. I didn't believe him, but it's true. No matter where I go on this earth, I'm going to see somebody that was a member of my church somewhere. And I saw them. And it's Pastor Jeffrey. Oh, hi. Okay, bye. Who are? And I couldn't recognize them. Until they finally said, "Oh yeah, we're from church." Oh yeah. Now, I don't want to judge Mary, but if I had been crying all night and if I was emotionally wrecked too, and a man standing there, I probably would have been freaking out too, right? Probably dirt on his hands, and I'd assume he was just from a landscaping company. Who knows, right? But here's the twist, the surprise. She wasn't wrong. Jesus is the gardener. Not only was, but is. And not the kind that she expected, nor that we expect. Now let's rewind a little bit to the Garden of Eden. In Genesis, God plants a garden, and we walk among the creation. Adam and Eve are given responsibility to tend it. But sin creeps in, weeds grow, shame enters, and we get kicked out of paradise. What a bummer, right? I love gardening. If you go by my house, you'll see me outside. If I'm not doing something else, I'm outside in the dirt. And when I got here, I immediately began the task of managing the parsonage gardens. And they were full of weeds, unfortunately, stones. And then when I dug in, grubs everywhere. And I had to do a lot of weeding. The first garden was supposed to be a place of life where we didn't have these worries of life. And like the parsonage gardens, it was not only full of weeds eventually and rocks of life, but the first garden was a garden that became a garden of death where we were kicked out. So what does God do? God begins gardening again. Even though we sinned, even though we turned away from God, God continues to garden to make us be as beautiful as we can be. Through covenants, prophets, the law, love, peace, hope, and joy, and finally through Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, God begins to replant. And on Easter morning in another garden, Jesus breaks the ground wide open. When Mary mistakes Jesus for the gardener, John is winking at us. This isn't just a case of, whoops, wrong guy. This is theologically rich. Because Jesus is the gardener. Not of Eden this time, but of a new creation. Jesus, who's the one who goes into the dirt, into death, and comes up alive. He doesn't just mow the lawn and trim the roses. Jesus gets his hands dirty to pull out the roots of sin and death, the cross being his shovel. The resurrection is the bloom. And here's the surprise. The resurrection didn't just happen to Jesus. It meant to happen in us. And this resurrection power isn't just for later time. It's for the here and now. I remember one time hearing a child say this at Easter time. We had a children's moment in another church, and they came up and said, the Easter bunny brings candy, and Jesus brings forgiveness and stuff, the kid said. Forgiveness and stuff. But Easter isn't about forgiveness and stuff. It's about transformation. Resurrection is God saying, I'm not done with this world. I'm not done yet. United Methodist theologian Albert Outler called prevenient grace the gardening grace. That means grace that comes before us, that we don't even know it exists, but God has already planted it in us for our sake. We didn't have to do anything to earn it. And he says that it goes before us, pulling out the weeds in our souls even before we know it. And sanctifying grace, that's resurrection power at work in us now, turning tombs into testimonies. Easter isn't about the past only. It's not just about what happens when we die. It's about God, what God is planting in us today. Let me tell you something beautiful. The earliest Christian theologians called Easter the divine joke. Jesus let death think it had won and then walked out of the tomb. Surprise! It was the joke on death. So here's my attempt to understand that with the divine humor. Be careful, they're dad jokes. What's the best way to make Easter easier? Replace the T with an I. Okay, that stunk. All right. Why doesn't Jesus... I like this one. Why doesn't Jesus go to Starbucks? He brews it himself. Hebrews is a book of the Bible. Forget it. All right, let's go back to the devil, who must be in those jokes. Now imagine the devil, Satan, evil, sin, smug, thinking, well, that's the end of the carpenter from Nazareth. Took care of him. Then Sunday rolls around and Jesus kicks the stone out like a swinging saloon door and says, not today, not today. Death thought it had the final word, and God said, I'm not finished speaking. So what's the surprise for us? Here's the thing about resurrection. It sneaks up on us. You think you're standing in a graveyard, and it turns that you're in the garden. You think the story is over, divorce, addiction, burnout, grief, and Jesus shows up and says, your name. Like in the garden, Mary. And just imagine Jesus standing behind you, silently saying your name in the midst of your worst time of life. Jeffrey. Jesus. Wow. So I wonder, what if Jesus is standing behind you, whispering your name? What is he dangling in your life? And what's he digging in? What's he planting? What seeds of hope is being placed in you that you don't even know about? The gardener is still at work. Friends, this is the gardener's surprise. God is not finished with the world. Not with you, not with me, not with anyone. The tomb is empty, the gardener is loose. And he's calling us to join in that work. So let's get our hands dirty. Let's pull up some weeds. Let's plant seeds of love, justice, peace, and grace. And when the world looks around wondering where Jesus is, maybe they'll mistake us for the gardener. Maybe, just maybe, if we dig in a little, we just might help someone see Christ in the world today. Amen.